The space station called Horizon Ring floated in the darkness between two solar systems. It was a meeting place for many species from across the galaxy. Some came here to trade, some came to make peace, and some came to judge. Commander Itha stood at the entrance of the docking bay and watched her ship pull away. She did not want to be here. This mission felt like a waste of her time and skills. She was a warrior, a leader of fleets, not some diplomat sent to watch primitive creatures and write reports about them. But the High Council had given her no choice. The humans had requested membership in the Galactic Accord, and someone needed to observe them closely. Someone needed to decide if they were worthy of joining the great civilizations of the galaxy, or if they were just another violent young species that would burn itself out within a few centuries. Itha had read the reports about humans. She knew what they were: dangerous, emotional, unpredictable. They fought wars against each other constantly. They destroyed their own planet with pollution and greed. They let feelings control their actions instead of logic and reason. In short, they were everything the Velans were not. Itha belonged to one of the oldest species in the known galaxy. The Velans had lived for over 40,000 years. They had built empires when humans were still living in caves and hunting animals with sharp sticks. They had learned long ago that emotions were weaknesses, that attachment was dangerous, and that efficiency was the highest virtue. This was especially true when it came to offspring. Among Velans, reproduction was a carefully managed process. Eggs were fertilized in laboratories, grown in hatching pods, and then transferred to state nurseries where trained caretakers raised them. Biological parents rarely saw their offspring. There was no need. The state provided everything the young ones needed: education, nutrition, training. Emotional attachment between parent and child was considered primitive, a leftover instinct from their ancient past that served no purpose in a modern civilization. Itha herself had produced 3 offspring. She had seen them twice in her life, both times at formal ceremonies. She did not know their names. She did not know their faces. She felt nothing for them, and this was considered normal and healthy among her people. This was the proper way, the logical way, the Velan way. Itha walked through the station with her 2 assistants following behind her. The corridors were filled with creatures from many worlds. She saw the tall, thin bodies of the Morathi traders. She passed a group of Keshan engineers with their 4 arms and large black eyes. She even spotted a Drenith philosopher, its body floating inside a bubble of special liquid. And then she saw the humans. They were everywhere, laughing, talking, touching each other in casual ways that made Itha uncomfortable. They seemed to have no sense of personal space, no understanding of proper behavior. One human male slapped another on the back and both of them laughed loudly. A human female held hands with another female as they walked past. Itha watched them with cold eyes. These creatures wanted to join the Galactic Accord. These loud, messy, emotional beings thought they deserved a place among the great civilizations. She would do her duty. She would observe them for the required 30 cycles, and then she would return to the High Council and recommend that humanity be denied membership. It was the only logical conclusion. The first 10 cycles passed slowly. Itha attended meetings with human diplomats. She toured their ships and their technology centers. She read their history files and studied their culture. Everything she learned confirmed what she already believed. Humans were violent. They had fought 2 massive world wars in a single century. They had invented weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They killed each other over religion, over land, over resources, over ideas. But there was something else in their history that Itha did not understand. Something that appeared again and again, but made no logical sense. The humans seemed obsessed with something they called family. They wrote stories about it. They made laws to protect it. They sacrificed money, time, and even their lives for these small groups of related individuals. This confused Itha deeply. Why would any creature waste resources on such a small unit? Why would they prioritize a handful of individuals over the greater good of their society? She added this to her report as further evidence of human irrationality. On the 15th cycle, Itha could not sleep. This was unusual for her. Velans were trained to control their bodies completely, including their sleep patterns. But something felt wrong inside her mind, something restless that she could not name. She decided to walk through the station. Physical movement sometimes helped clear the thoughts. The corridors were quiet at this hour. Most species on the station were sleeping. The lights had been dimmed to simulate night. Itha walked past closed doors and empty hallways until she reached the observation deck. The observation deck was a large room with massive windows that looked out into space. It was a popular place during the day, filled with creatures watching the stars or the ships coming and going. But now it was empty. Or so Itha thought. She stepped into the room and immediately stopped. There was someone there, sitting alone in a chair near the largest window, a human, a male based on his body shape. He sat with his back to her, looking out at the stars. Itha almost turned and left. She had no desire to interact with humans outside of official meetings, but then she heard something that made her freeze. A small sound, high and soft, the sound of a very young creature. She moved to the side, staying in the shadows, and looked more carefully at the human male. Now she could see what he held in his arms. It was a baby, a human infant, tiny and fragile, wrapped in a soft blanket. Itha felt her body go still. She had never seen a human offspring this close before. It was so small, so helpless. Among Velans, offspring were kept in nurseries, away from public spaces. They were certainly never carried around by adults, and absolutely never by males. Males had no role in offspring development among Velans. None at all. The idea of a male holding a baby was almost absurd. It would be like asking a warrior to perform the duties of a food preparer. It simply was not done. Yet here was this human male, alone in the middle of the night, holding an infant in his arms. Itha watched from the shadows. She expected the male to call for help. Perhaps the baby belonged to someone else, and he was simply waiting for its mother to return. Perhaps he was uncomfortable and annoyed at being stuck with this task. But the human did none of these things. Instead, he shifted the baby gently in his arms and began to speak to it in a soft, low voice. Itha could not understand his words. Her translator was set to formal speech patterns, not the strange sounds he was making, but she could hear the tone of his voice. It was warm, gentle, full of something she could not identify. The baby made another small sound, and the human male smiled. Not a formal smile, not a polite smile, a real smile, one that changed his whole face and made his tired eyes shine with light. Itha stood frozen in the shadows, unable to look away. Something was happening here, something she did not understand. And for the first time since arriving on this station, Commander Itha felt something other than boredom and contempt. She felt curious. Itha remained in the shadows, watching the human male with the baby. She knew she should leave. This was a private moment and she had no business observing it, but her feet would not move. Something held her in place, something stronger than logic or duty. The baby began to fuss. Its small face twisted, and it made unhappy sounds that grew louder with each passing moment. Itha expected the male to become frustrated. Among Velans, any sound from an offspring was considered a failure of proper training. Caretakers were punished if the young ones in their care made too much noise. But the human male did not seem angry. He did not seem annoyed. Instead, he lifted the baby higher against his chest and began to rock gently back and forth. He made soft sounds with his mouth, sounds that had no words but seemed to carry meaning anyway. The baby continued to cry. The male reached down beside his chair and picked up a small container. Itha could see it was filled with some kind of white liquid. The human tested the liquid by putting a small drop on his wrist, checking something she did not understand. Then he brought the container to the baby's mouth. The baby immediately stopped crying. Its small lips wrapped around the top of the container, and it began to drink. The only sound now was soft, sucking noises and the quiet hum of the station's life support systems. Itha watched, fascinated against her will. The male looked down at the baby with an expression she had never seen before. His eyes were soft. His whole face seemed to relax. One of his hands supported the baby's head with extreme care, as if the tiny creature was made of something precious and breakable. The baby's hand, so small it could barely wrap around a single finger, reached up and grabbed onto the male's thumb. It held on tightly while it drank. And the male smiled again, that same real smile, full of warmth and light. Itha felt something strange happen inside her chest, a tightness, a flutter. She did not know what it was. She had never felt anything like it before. She studied the human more carefully now. He looked tired. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes, and his shoulders carried a heaviness that spoke of many sleepless nights. His clothes were simple and slightly wrinkled. He was not a wealthy human or an important one, she guessed, just an ordinary male. Yet he held that baby as if it was the most important thing in the entire galaxy. The baby finished drinking. The male set aside the container and lifted the infant to his shoulder. He began to pat its back gently, using light touches that seemed almost too soft to do anything. He continued making those wordless sounds, those gentle noises that seemed to comfort the small creature. After a few moments, the baby made a small burping sound. The male laughed quietly, a sound of genuine amusement and affection. He lowered the baby back into his arms and looked at its face. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to the baby's forehead. Itha felt her body go completely still. She knew this gesture. She had read about it in human cultural files. They called it a kiss. It was a sign of affection, of love, of connection between individuals. Velens did not do such things. Velens did not need such things. Physical contact between individuals was limited to necessary functions only. The idea of pressing one's face to another creature as a sign of emotion was considered primitive and unsanitary. But watching this human male kiss his baby's forehead, Itha did not feel disgust. She did not feel superiority. She felt something else entirely, something she could not name because she had never felt it before. The male began to speak to the baby again. This time, Itha adjusted her translator to pick up informal speech patterns. "There we go, little star," the male said softly. "All full now, all warm and safe. Your daddy's got you. Daddy will always have you." His voice cracked slightly on the last words. Itha saw moisture gather in the corners of his eyes. He was crying, she realized. Leaking fluid from his eyes, a human response to strong emotion. "I know you miss her," the male whispered to the baby. "I miss her too, every single day. But we're going to be okay, you and me. We're going to be just fine. I promised your mother, and I'm going to keep that promise." The baby made a small cooing sound, as if responding to his words. The male held the infant closer. "You look just like her, you know, same eyes, same beautiful face. Every time I look at you, I see her. And it hurts so much, little star. But it's also the most wonderful thing in my life." Itha did not understand everything the male was saying. Some human concepts did not translate well into Velen language, but she understood enough. This male had lost someone, the baby's mother perhaps. He was alone now, caring for this infant by himself. This was impossible by Velen standards. A single parent could not properly raise offspring. It was inefficient, dangerous, and emotionally harmful. When a Velen parent died, the offspring was simply transferred to another caretaker. No one expected a surviving parent to continue caring for young ones alone. That would be foolish. But this human male was doing exactly that. Not just doing it, but choosing it, wanting it. Itha watched as he rocked the baby gently, humming a soft tune that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. The baby's eyes began to close. Its tiny hand still held onto his thumb, even as it drifted toward sleep. "Sleep now, Nari," the male whispered. "Dream of beautiful things. Dream of your mother holding you, singing to you. She's still with us, little star. She's in every breath you take. She's in every beat of my heart." The baby's eyes closed completely. Its breathing became slow and even. It had fallen asleep, safe and warm in its father's arms. The male did not put the baby down. He did not move to transfer it to a sleeping container or call for someone else to take over. He simply sat there, holding his sleeping daughter, watching the stars drift past the window. Itha stood in the shadows for a long time, watching them both. She had observed many things during her time on the station. She had seen human technology, human politics, human social structures. She had studied their weapons and their wars, their failures and their foolishness. But she had never seen anything like this. This male, tired and alone and grieving, had woken in the middle of the night to feed his baby. He had held her with more tenderness than Itha had ever witnessed in her entire life. He had spoken to her with love, with pain, with a devotion that went beyond anything Itha could understand. Among Velans, this male would be considered defective, emotional, weak. He would be removed from any position of importance and sent for psychological correction. But watching him now, holding his sleeping daughter while stars burned in the darkness outside, Itha did not see weakness. She saw something else, something that looked almost like strength. She did not understand it. She could not explain it. But she knew, deep in some part of herself that she had never accessed before, that she had just witnessed something important. Something that might change everything she thought she knew about humans. Itha turned and walked silently away from the observation deck. Her mind was filled with questions she had never asked before. Her chest still held that strange tightness, that flutter she could not name. She returned to her quarters, but she did not sleep. She lay in the darkness and thought about a human male crying as he fed his baby daughter. And for the first time in her life, Commander Itha wondered if the Velen way was truly the only way. The thought frightened her. It went against everything she had been taught, everything she believed. But once it entered her mind, she could not push it away. She had come to this station to judge humans. She had expected to find them lacking, primitive, unworthy. Instead, she had found something she never expected. She had found a question she did not know how to answer. Itha returned to the observation deck the next night. She told herself it was for research purposes. She told herself she needed to understand human behavior more completely before making her final report. She told herself many things, but none of them were the real reason she came back. The real reason was that she could not stop thinking about what she had seen. The human male was there again in the same chair, holding the same baby. This time he was not feeding her. He was simply holding her, looking out at the stars, speaking to her in that soft voice. Itha watched from the doorway for a long moment. Then, before she could stop herself, she stepped forward into the light. The male noticed her immediately. His body tensed and he pulled the baby closer to his chest. It was a protective movement, instinctive and quick. His eyes scanned her with sudden alertness, looking for danger. Itha stopped walking. She raised her hand slightly to show she meant no harm. "I apologize for startling you," she said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, softer than usual. The male relaxed slightly, though he kept the baby close. "It's okay," he said. "I just wasn't expecting anyone. Most people don't come here this late." Itha nodded. She should leave now. This was becoming too personal, too unusual. But her feet carried her forward instead, toward the empty chair beside him. "May I sit?" she asked. The male seemed surprised by the question. He looked at her uniform, recognizing her as a member of the Velen delegation. Something flickered across his face, perhaps uncertainty or nervousness. But then he nodded. Sure, of course. Itha sat down. She looked out at the stars for a moment, then turned her attention to the baby. The infant was awake, watching her with large dark eyes that seemed too curious for such a small creature. Your offspring, Itha said, it is healthy. The male smiled at the question. Her name is Nari, and yes, she's very healthy, growing bigger every day. Itha processed this information. The humans assigned gender to their offspring immediately, unlike Velans who considered such distinctions unimportant until maturity, and they gave them individual names, personal identities, from birth. Nari, she repeated, the word felt strange on her tongue. This name has meaning. It means grace, the male said, or lily, depending on how you interpret it. My wife chose it. His voice caught slightly on the word wife. Itha paused. Then she asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the previous night. Where is the mother of this child? Why does a male perform caretaker functions alone? The male's face changed. Pain moved across his features like a shadow. He looked down at Nari, at her small face and tiny hands, and Itha saw him struggle with something inside himself. She died, he said quietly. During childbirth, there were complications. The medical team did everything they could, but he stopped, unable to continue. Itha waited in silence. The male took a deep breath. Her name was Hana. She was everything to me. We had planned this life together, this family. We were going to raise Nari together, watch her grow up, see her become whoever she was meant to be. His voice broke again. But now it's just me and this little girl. Itha considered this. Among my people, she said slowly, when a parent dies, the offspring is transferred to institutional care. A surviving parent is not expected to raise young ones alone. It is considered illogical and inefficient. The male looked at her with an expression she could not read. Transferred? You mean taken away? The offspring would be cared for by trained professionals. They would receive proper nutrition, education, and development. The surviving parent would be free to return to productive work without the burden of child-rearing. The male's arms tightened around Nari. Burden, he repeated. His voice was soft but held something sharp underneath. You think my daughter is a burden? Itha realized she had said something wrong, but she did not understand what. I meant no offense. I was simply explaining the Velan approach. We prioritize efficiency and logic in all things, including offspring development. The male was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but filled with something intense. Let me explain something to you, he said. This child is not a burden. She is not a task to be completed or a problem to be solved. She is my daughter. She is the most important thing in my life, in this universe, in any universe. He looked down at Nari, who was watching him with those large, curious eyes. When my wife died, I wanted to die too. The pain was so bad, so heavy, I didn't know how to keep breathing. But then I looked at this little face and I knew I had to keep going. Not for myself, for her. Itha listened, fascinated and confused. Every night I wake up to feed her. Every morning I check to make sure she's still breathing. I change her clothes, I clean her, I hold her when she cries. And yes, I'm tired. Yes, I'm exhausted. Yes, sometimes I feel like I can't do this anymore. He paused, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. But then she looks at me. She wraps her little hand around my finger. She smiles at me, this tiny toothless smile, and suddenly none of that matters. Suddenly I remember why I breathe. He looked up at Itha, meeting her eyes directly. She is the reason I breathe. Do you understand? Not a burden, not a duty, not an obligation. She is my reason for existing, and I would die before I let anyone take her away from me. Itha sat in silence. She had no words. In the Velan language, there was no term for what this male was describing. They had words for duty, for responsibility, for biological reproduction. But this thing he spoke of, this fierce devotion, this willingness to sacrifice everything for another creature. She did not have a word for it. Among humans, she finally said, this is normal. Males care for offspring in this way. The male nodded. Not all humans are good parents. We have failures too, people who abandon their children or hurt them. But many of us, most of us, would do anything for our kids. Fathers especially, he paused, searching for words. We're supposed to protect them, provide for them, love them. It's not just what we do, it's who we are. Itha thought about her own 3 offspring. Somewhere on the Velen homeworld, they were being raised by strangers. She did not know their names. She did not know their faces. She had never held them the way this male held his daughter. She had never even wanted to. Until now. This love you speak of, Itha said slowly. This bond between parent and child. It makes you do things that are not logical. It makes you sacrifice sleep, comfort, perhaps even your career. It makes you suffer. The male smiled, a sad and beautiful smile. Yes. And yet you choose it, you want it. I wouldn't give it up for anything in the galaxy. Itha looked at little Nari, who had fallen asleep during their conversation. The baby's face was peaceful, content, safe in her father's arms. I do not understand, Itha admitted, but I want to understand. The male looked at her with surprise and perhaps with something like hope. That's a good start, he said gently. Understanding usually begins with wanting to. They sat together in silence, watching the stars. Itha had come to this station to judge humans. She had expected to find them lacking. Instead, a single human father had shown her something she had never known was missing from her own life. And now she had to decide what to do with this new knowledge. Itha could not sleep that night. She lay in her quarters and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts she had never had before. The human male, Park T, had given her his name before they parted. He had told her she was welcome to visit again if she wanted to learn more about human families. He had smiled at her, a genuine smile, as if she was not a representative of a species that considered his people primitive and unworthy. He had shown her kindness. Itha did not know what to do with kindness. She thought about her 3 offspring. Somewhere on the Velen homeworld they existed, living, growing, being raised by caretakers who followed strict protocols and efficiency guidelines. They would never know their biological mother. They would never feel the warmth of being held in loving arms late at night. They would never hear someone whisper to them that they were the reason for breathing. For the first time in her life, Itha felt something that might have been regret. She pushed the feeling away. It was illogical. The Velen system was designed over thousands of years to produce the best possible outcomes for society. Individual attachment was a weakness, a primitive instinct that led to poor decisions and inefficient resource allocation. The caretaker system freed adults to focus on productive work while ensuring offspring received standardized, quality development. It was the logical way, the Velen way. But Park T's words echoed in her mind. She is the reason I breathe. Itha stood up from her bed and walked to her computer terminal. If she could not sleep, she would work. She would continue her research on humans. Perhaps understanding them better would help quiet these strange new thoughts. She accessed the Human Cultural Archives and began to read. Hours passed. The station's artificial night began to fade toward artificial dawn, and Itha read and read and read. She found their history, full of violence and war just as she expected. Humans had killed each other in terrible numbers. They had invented weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They had fought over land, resources, religion, ideas, and sometimes nothing at all. But that was not all she found. She found stories of parents shielding their children with their own bodies during disasters, mothers throwing themselves in front of danger to save their young, fathers working themselves to exhaustion, taking multiple jobs, destroying their own health, just to provide food and shelter for their families. She found a human concept called sacrifice that had no equivalent in Velen society. It meant giving up something precious for the sake of another. It meant choosing pain so that someone else could have happiness. She found records of human parents traveling across dangerous territories, crossing oceans, climbing mountains, all to find safety for their children. She found stories of single fathers raising daughters alone, teaching them to be strong and kind. She found tales of mothers who kept singing to their bobbies even as the world fell apart around them. She found love. It was everywhere in human culture. Love between parents and children, love between partners, love between friends, love for strangers they had never met. Humans built their entire civilization on this emotion that Velans considered a weakness. And they had survived. Despite all their violence, all their foolishness, all their irrationality, humans had spread across their solar system and reached for the stars. They had endured plagues, wars, natural disasters, and their own self-destructive tendencies. They had fallen down again and every time they got back up. Why, Itha wondered, what gave them the strength to keep going? The answer was in everything she had read. Love, connection, the bonds between individuals that made them willing to fight, to sacrifice, to die for each other. Velens had efficiency. Velens had logic. Velens had 40,000 years of civilization built on cold, rational principles. But Velens did not have what humans had. Itha leaned back from her terminal and stared at the wall. She thought about the High Council's assessment of humanity: dangerous, violent, emotionally unstable, a threat to galactic peace. The assessment was not wrong. Humans were all of those things. But it was incomplete, fatally incomplete. The Council had measured human warfare but ignored human love. They had cataloged human conflict but dismissed human sacrifice. They had studied human weapons but never understood why humans fought in the first place. Humans fought because they loved. They killed because they protected. They went to war because somewhere behind every soldier was a family waiting at home, a child sleeping in a father's arms, a reason for breathing. This made them dangerous, yes, but it also made them something else. It made them strong. Itha thought about the Galactic Accord, the great alliance of civilizations that had kept peace in the galaxy for millennia. The Velans were one of its founding members. They had helped write the rules, design the systems, build the structures of galactic governance. And yet the galaxy was still full of threats: aggressive species, resource conflicts, ideological wars. The Accord held together through negotiation and occasional force, but it was a fragile peace. What would happen if humans joined the Accord? The Council feared they would bring chaos, conflict, violence. But Itha was beginning to see another possibility. Humans might bring strength, the strength of creatures who loved so fiercely they would face any danger to protect what they cherished, the strength of beings who got back up after every fall because they had someone waiting for them. Park T had lost his wife. He was exhausted, alone, grieving. By any logical measure, he should have given up. He should have transferred his daughter to professional caretakers and returned to productive work. Instead, he woke every night to feed her. He held her and sang to her and told her she was his reason for breathing. That was not weakness. That was a kind of strength Itha had never known existed. She stood up from her terminal and began to pace her quarters. The diplomatic conference would happen soon. The Velen delegation would present their assessment. Ambassador Kova, the senior Velen diplomat, would recommend that humanity be denied membership in the Accord. Itha was supposed to support this recommendation. It was her duty. It was what the High Council expected. But how could she? How could she tell the galaxy that humans were unworthy when she had seen a single father holding his daughter with more love than the entire Velen civilization contained? She stopped packing and stood still. For 40,000 years, Velens had done things their way: logical, efficient, cold. For 40,000 years, Itha had never questioned it. But now she thought about her 3 offspring, alone in a nursery somewhere, never knowing their mother's face or voice. Now she thought about Park T, crying as he fed his baby, whispering that she was his reason for breathing. Now she understood that efficiency was not everything. Logic was not everything. There were things in the universe that could not be measured or optimized. Things like love. Itha made a decision. It went against her training, her culture, everything she had believed for her entire life. But it felt right. She would speak at the conference. She would tell the truth about what she had witnessed. She would tell the galaxy about a human father and his daughter. She did not know if it would change anything. She did not know if anyone would listen. But she knew she had to try. Because somewhere in a nursery on the Velen homeworld, 3 offspring were growing up without knowing what love felt like. And if Itha could help change that, even a little, then maybe her own life would finally have a reason for breathing. The great chamber of the Galactic Accord was silent. Representatives from over 200 species sat in their assigned positions, arranged in a massive circle around a central platform. The ceiling above them showed the stars themselves, a live projection of the galaxy they all shared. Today they would vote on humanity's membership. Ambassador Kova stood at the central platform, finishing his prepared statement. His voice was calm and measured, each word carefully chosen. In conclusion, he said, the Velen delegation has observed humanity for the required period. We have studied their history, their culture, their technology, and their behavior. Our assessment is clear. Humans are a young species with dangerous tendencies. Their history is filled with violence. Their emotions cloud their judgment. They are not ready for membership in the Galactic Accord. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The human delegation sat in their section, their faces showing various emotions. Disappointment, anger. Some of them looked like they had expected this outcome. Ambassador Kova nodded his head. The Velen delegation recommends rejection of humanity's application. We believe this is the logical course of action for the safety and stability of galactic civilization. He stepped back from the platform. The chief moderator, a being of pure energy from a species whose name could not be pronounced, spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Velen recommendation has been noted. Does any member of the Velen delegation wish to add additional testimony? Silence. Then Commander Itha stood up. Ambassador Kova turned to look at her with surprise and displeasure. This was not part of the plan. Itha had been instructed to remain silent. Her role was to observe and support, nothing more. But Itha walked toward the central platform anyway. I wish to speak, she said. The moderator acknowledged her with a pulse of light. Commander Itha of the Velen fleet, you may address the assembly. Itha stepped onto the platform. The eyes of 200 species fixed upon her. Somewhere in the human section, she knew Park T was watching, though she could not see him from here. She had not told him about this. She had not told anyone. She took a breath and began. Ambassador Kova's assessment is accurate in its facts. Humans are violent. They are emotional. They have fought terrible wars against each other. All of this is true. The human delegation shifted uncomfortably. This did not sound like it was going in their favor. But the assessment is incomplete, Itha continued. It measures one part of humanity while ignoring another, and I believe this error could cost us greatly. Ambassador Kova's eyes narrowed, but he did not interrupt. 15 cycles ago, I witnessed something that changed my understanding of humans entirely. It was late at night on the station. I was walking through the observation deck when I found a human male alone with his infant daughter. The chamber was completely silent. He was feeding her, caring for her. He was exhausted. He had dark circles under his eyes and weariness in every movement. His wife, the mother of his child, had died during childbirth. He was alone. Itha paused, remembering. Among Velans, such a male would be considered inefficient, illogical. We would remove the offspring and transfer it to professional caretakers. The father would be freed to return to productive work. This is our way. It has been our way for thousands of years. She looked out at the assembly. But this human father did not want to be freed. He did not see his daughter as a burden to be transferred. He held her in his arms and called her his reason for breathing. The words hung in the air. I did not understand this at first. I could not understand why any creature would sacrifice sleep, comfort, and personal advancement for the sake of a single small offspring. It seemed irrational, wasteful, weak. She straightened her shoulders. I was wrong. A ripple of surprise moved through the Velan section. I spent many nights researching human culture after that encounter. I found their history of violence, yes, but I also found something else. I found parents dying to protect their children, fathers working themselves to exhaustion for their families, mothers shielding infants with their own bodies. I found humans building their entire civilization on something they call love. The translator struggled with the word. Different species heard it in different ways, some as a concept they understood, others as something strange and new. We Velans have measured human weapons. We have analyzed their wars. We have cataloged their conflicts, but we failed to understand the source of their strength. Humans do not fight because they love violence. They fight because they love each other, fiercely, irrationally, beautifully. Itha's voice grew stronger. Any species that produces fathers like the one I met, who hold their children in the darkness and call them their reason for breathing, is not a threat to this galaxy. They are its future. She looked directly at the human delegation for the first time. She found Park T in the crowd. He was holding Nari in his arms, just as he had that night on the observation deck. His eyes were shining with moisture. I have lived for over 100 cycles, Itha said. I have commanded fleets. I have won battles. I have served my people with complete loyalty, but I have never held my own offspring. I have never sung to them in the darkness. I have never told them they are my reason for breathing. Her voice cracked slightly, an emotion she had never shown in public before. The Velan way is efficient, but efficiency is not everything. Logic is not everything. There are things in the universe that cannot be measured or optimized. Things like love, things like family, things like holding a baby beneath the stars and promising to protect them forever. She turned back to address the full assembly. I do not know if humans are ready for the Galactic Accord. Perhaps they still have much to learn. Perhaps they will make mistakes. But I know this much. Any species capable of love this fierce, this powerful, this willing to sacrifice everything for those they cherish, has something to offer this galaxy that many of us have forgotten. She bowed her head. I withdraw my support for the Velan recommendation. I urge this assembly to welcome humanity into our community, not because they are perfect, but because they have something we need, something many of us lost long ago. She stepped back from the platform. The chamber erupted. Voices from dozens of species filled the air, debating, arguing, processing what they had just heard. Ambassador Kova was staring at Itha with an expression of cold fury, but she did not care. She had spoken the truth. Whatever happened next was beyond her control. The vote took place 1 hour later. Humanity was admitted to the Galactic Accord by a margin of 3 votes. After the ceremony, Itha found Park T waiting outside the chamber. He was still holding Nari, who was sleeping peacefully against his shoulder. "Thank you," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. Itha shook her head. "Do not thank me. Thank yourself. Thank your daughter. You showed me something I did not know existed." Park T smiled. "What will you do now? Your ambassador looked pretty angry." "I will face the consequences of my actions," Itha said, "whatever they may be." And after that, Itha was quiet for a moment. Then she said something she had never imagined saying. I have 3 offspring on the Velen homeworld. I have never met them. I do not know their names or their faces, but I think I would like to change that. Park T's smile widened. That sounds like a good start. Itha looked at little Nari, sleeping safe in her father's arms. You taught me something important, Park T. You taught me that strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is love. She turned and walked away, toward whatever future awaited her. Months later, Itha stood on the Velen homeworld, outside a building she had never entered before, the nursery where her offspring were being raised. Her heart beat fast in her chest. She had faced enemy fleets with less nervousness than she felt now. The door opened. A caretaker looked at her with confusion. I am here to see my offspring, Itha said. I am their biological mother. The caretaker's confusion deepened. This was highly unusual, but Itha's rank and authority were undeniable, and eventually she was led inside. 3 young Velens sat in a common room. They looked up as she entered. Their eyes held curiosity but no recognition. Why would they recognize her? They had never seen her face. The eldest, a female perhaps 8 cycles old, spoke first. Who are you? Itha knelt before them. It was the first time she had ever knelt before anyone. I am your mother, she said, and I am sorry I have been gone for so long. The offspring stared at her in confusion. I do not expect you to understand, Itha continued. I do not fully understand it myself, but I met a human who taught me something important. He taught me that children are not burdens. They are reasons for breathing. She reached out slowly and touched the eldest offspring's hand. I would like to learn your names, Itha said. I would like to know who you are, and if you will allow me, I would like to try to be your mother, not just biologically, but truly. The eldest offspring looked at her siblings, then back at Itha. Why now? Why after all this time? Itha thought of Park T, holding his daughter beneath the stars. She thought of his tired eyes and his gentle hands. She thought of his voice saying, she is the reason I breathe. Because a human showed me what I had forgotten, Itha said. Because I finally understand what matters, and because I do not want to waste any more time. The eldest offspring was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took Itha's hand. My name is Kira, she said. Itha felt moisture gather in her eyes. She had not known Velens could cry. Hello, Kira, she whispered. I am so very glad to meet you. And in that moment, Commander Itha finally understood what Park T had meant. She had found her reason for breathing.